the bulls, but seeing it in 3D, it's just like you're there. And I'll tell you, seeing the rest of the film is actually quite interesting. There's a lot of bloody goring, and I learned a lot. Before the film, I thought, I think I could probably run with bulls, but after seeing what happens, I'll stand on the other side of the wall. That'll be me.
Or the other side of the camera. Scary as hell. One of the things that we have been talking about, challenges, about how different people approach 3D, and it is funny because every time you see like a big 3D production movie, or like almost every blockbuster is coming out in 3D. I mean, ours, Star Trek Into Darkness, but also many others, and it's become kind of mainstream to see 3D. I mean, you go to the theater and you can watch it in 3D, and it's like, it's all around you, and people kind of take it for granted. But when you get into creating the pieces, and you can see here lots of different approaches to creating just that. And I wanted to dig a little bit more in, especially for people who maybe may not be that familiar with it. What's the difference between creating the 3D, like doing the 3D afterwards with the archival footage or with animation or etc., or shooting the 3D? Because it's not like one is easier than the other. I mean, both have their own little problems. So what will be, depending on who has to choose what technique, what do you think will be the advantages of that technique over the other? What kind of things do you find more challenging?
Well, first of all, the advances in technology have made shooting live 3D much more accessible. I mean, Panasonic makes 3 different cameras that are made for 3D. They're not a giant, shooting with a rig, there are some advantages to it, but it's very cumbersome. You need a big crew. It's, you can't put it inside a race car the way I could take, actually at GoPros, there's stereo GoPros that are mounted inside the car with the driver. Not to mention I had other cameras mounted on the front hood of a van that I drove around the race course. So the technology is advancing fast enough so that it's more, the 3D becomes more accessible, and it's not easier to do. You're able to do it at least. There are certainly challenges, as you well know, in editorial, because if you make mistakes in 3D, it hurts.
I did his previous show, that's why he's speaking on it.
Why don't I, we always say in the world of 3D, we're always living on the bleeding edge, because literally, on the first show I did, the software for editing was put out the day after I finished shooting. So that's the kind of challenges you face. You're always up against the wall and discovering things, and it's like being on the frontier of an artistic curve.
Anybody else want to share the pain?
I talk about the challenge of, for us, I think we were dealing with different artists who approach 3D differently themselves. So that's kind of a challenge, because when you talk about things like, where your sort of plane is, it would be different depending who the artist was. Some were very subtle, some, the guy would do the florals, he really kind of wanted to come out at you.
Yeah, because you really have artists who are trying to push that boundary and kind of create a reaction, and other ones that are just trying to make it subtle so you can watch the beauty. Like
yeah, and then the two, like the one who does the still photography with the flower, as you see, he uses 2 cameras and a beam splitter, much the way a filmmaker might, whereas Claudia, the artist with the ghosts and the story, she creates the 3D herself, pixel by pixel. Like actually, she only shoots with one camera and then creates all the other eye just, in Photoshop, which the tool does allow her to do that. One of the guys only works in anaglyph. We had to convert his work to, he never thought of it in polarized. He didn't have a left and a right eye. He actually tones in Photoshop in red and cyan. You'd have layers that would have both images on it. It was almost impossible to pull it apart. He thought he was going to be out of the show, but luckily we figured out a way to be able to do polarized with him. So I think that was a challenge for us. Then when we shot our live action, we said, let's be as kind of subtle as possible with it. Almost to be, our live action is almost the 2D in their 3D world in a way. We went really kind of conservative with it.
For me, this was my first 3D thing, and I wasn't really handling the technical end of it, but I will say that from the very beginning, there was the element of composing the space as well as the pace and the composition and all that. So, we were aware of trying to really get the most out of that, and it was my first outing with 3D, but it was fun to really actually have that extra component to play with. And we discovered a lot of things along the way, and I think by the time we were finished, we were ready to start doing it again. We just kind of figured it out, but it was a huge learning curve, but it was really fun.
Quick anecdote. What he said about, like, at the end of the movie, everything was great. It happens at every level when you're on a 3D project. Like, that's literally that's one phrase that I said on Star Trek when we were 7 months away from the deadline and we were dealing with challenges and redesigning pipelines and workflows. I was like, God damn it, at the end it's going to be great. we're going to have it all ready when we don't need it anymore. And as you're hearing, I mean, the 3D has a huge degree of experimentation and testing and playing with it, right? And like your piece, or art, the artfulness of it, and pushing sometimes the boundaries of 3D and creating reactions. Is that something that you, the question is general, but especially for the art side, like, is that something that you looked for from the beginning, or is that something that you found in the path of creating it? Or it was like a happy accident and then exploited, or it was like more like intentional?
I think it was just total freedom that we got. I think it starts with the creative freedom that we had this time to given, and we had, of course, funding, but we struggled with the time. We could go on and on, but we had to stop things and we had to deliver. But again, we were very fortunate that as we were working on the film, the school put up a small stereoscopic theater so we could bring the files in and test. At the same time, we have an Institute for Media Innovation. They have a round circular screen that has totally different laws for stereoscopic. So we just learned that every venue is a total challenge, and I have to thank New Media Festival and Susanna, because tonight I was really worried. Is it gonna work at all? I mean, what's gonna happen? Are we too close?
We tested it.
It was phenomenal. I mean, I just have to thank you, because that's like I was so worried from Singapore on a plane out that is it same here as it's over there? And yeah, so it was very nice. I'm very happy.
That's great. What about some of the pieces? Well, the rest of the pieces were more of the real image. That's why I wanted to talk about the artistry of it. But do you guys have any anecdotes, like happy accidents that you found on the shooting that it just happened to be super cool, or you were actually looking? Because I think that's one thing that happens on every show. Like, you're trying to achieve something, and then you achieve something completely different. Like, hang on a second, that's cool. I might want to keep that. And I don't know. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Do you have any of that?
I could throw something out there on Glimpse, the surfboard piece. That's actually a TV series. And just real quick, what she was saying about you really have to decide what your content's going to be used for before you start to do production, because how you see it on a TV, how you see it on a mobile device, and how you see it theatrically are completely different. And it can either be too intense for the theater screen or too flat for the TV. But back to your question, on Glimpse, which is actually a behind-the-scenes TV series, and I was worried like her when Glimpse came up, because it's not really meant for theatric. We were shooting a scene in Taylor Guitar's factory, because we talk about different products and how they're made and kind of take you behind the scenes. This particular one was NOLL surfboards. We had Stone Brewery and Taylor Guitars for the first episode. Well, shooting behind glass can be tricky, and Taylor Guitars had CNC machines to make quite a few of their parts of their guitars, and it was a huge worry about whether the reflections on the glass were going to be a problem. There were scratches and scrapes. They were wondering if they should clean the glass. Well, we got really lucky. We just shot it as it was, and everybody that shoots 3D knows this. It's not easy to set up for a 3D shot. It takes a long time, and it can be cumbersome, and it just worked. So it was kind of one of those Easter eggs where it just happened to work for us.
I had
It is so funny because unless you asked this question, nobody shared it, but it is true. I mean, 3D production is so full of happy accidents and things that you were not expecting at all.
we had done a camera test, and this is in the very beginning, and we had set up the shot so that there was an alarm clock and then a person behind it, and so there was this composing the depth. And we were, looking at it, we were kind of excited about it, and a fly landed on the clock, and it was spectacular. I mean, it was like, so all of a sudden, we're like, we understood in a whole new way what the possibilities were here, and just how that, it's just like, it was unbelievable. That little fly was like, oh my God.
And I think that's something that it's very interesting that you're talking about that, because that's something that you guys said on the documentary, and it's the fact that when you're looking at something in 3D, something different happens in your brain. Like we're built to see in 3D, and when we're seeing a 2D image, we have to imagine a lot of the things that are happening over there. But when you're watching in 3D, I mean, imagine looking at a macro photography, a 2D macro photography of something is astonishing. But when you're looking at a macro photography or something, looking at something that you're not able to see, usually with your eyes, but in 3D, it's like fireworks. I mean, you guys have seen it. I mean, when you are like seeing a picture of the Civil War, the people have volume. It's not flat gray people that somebody painted anymore. It's people who have ears, and it's one in front of the other. And I think that helps engaging with not just stories. I mean, what you were talking about at the beginning, the fact that the story has to be a search of the image, but also just the silliest objects like a fly or the sand, when the sand that's coming out of the table when you're standing the surfboard, or in the race, like all the little details of it. How is that an advantage for all of you guys, or do you guys think that people might be lost in the little details, just wandering around the image and get distracted about the story? What do you guys think?
I think it makes it more immersive. I think that's what the amazing thing about 3D is. And that's actually, there's this thing about feature films, and that's actually where 3D is flourishing at this point. It's flourishing in features, and it's sort of dying, especially in this country, for TVs. But the hope is that autostereoscopic phones and iPads very soon will be out so that all forms of 3D will be able to see in a small format. And that, I hope, will save 3D in this country. But the thing about films, and what people don't understand, is when you have a film like Terminator or something, when there's huge action and fast cutting, 3D gets lost. I don't know, it's like a waste of time as far as I'm concerned.
I disagree.
Yeah, but when you slow it down and your brain,
I've been blowing ships for 7 months, and that looks good.
Well, Star Trek was
Have you guys seen Star Trek?
It was much slower cutting wise. But Star Trek was much, compared to a lot of other 3D action films, it was slower. You could take in the 3D. You could appreciate it. Sometimes it goes by so quickly, your brain takes longer to process 3D, and if it's cut quickly, you're not seeing it.
Yeah, with our documentary, the 3D, it's kind of subtle. It's a very controlled environment. We can frame the shots, with some precision, and the best part of it, you don't even notice it's in 3D. You just feel like you're there, and it's not. The president of our company kind of a long time was from this philosophy of like the Avatar thing. You're like looking into a window, and he, for a long time felt that the poke you in the eye shots were very distracting. So, although the surfboard does come forward, most of the 3D is not so much in your face, but it's effective because it's something that's probably pretty boring to a lot of people, but in 3D it makes it far more interesting.
For me, I think 3D sort of just reminds me that I should really go out into the real world and look around a little more and really absorb it. Because when you see it here, it's sort of a reminder, wow, that flower really does look like that. If I really took some time and looked at it, I'm living in the 3D world, so I should, you know, maybe take advantage of that with my own eye and brain in everyday life. I think that it's kind of a reminder of that to me when I see those images. Like, wow, it's so fantastic here, but it's fantastic out here as well.
Yeah, like not taking it for granted kind of thing.
Yeah, in a way. And I think that's what I get from the, you know, in our piece, from the artists in our piece, that, you know, they're actually kind of, you know, creating a world for you to see. And that is more engaging. And yet, like I said, we live in that world ourselves.
There is something very magical that happens when you watch 3D on screen, because one of the Ray on the documentary was talking about the whole thing of why we see 3D, and it's because we have two eyes. One thing that if you haven't worked on a 3D movie you don't realize is that when we're looking at 3D, if we have a finger in front of our face, we're looking at that finger and we're kind of discarding all the rest because we're deciding what we're looking at. But when you're on the screen, when you're creating 3D for the screen, you cannot know where the spectators are going to be looking at, and people cannot look at different points. You have to compress the space and make the whole shot as comfortable as you can to be able for the shot to reach as much audience as you can. And this it's kind of difficult to explain if you don't without the big 3D terms and stuff. But just the kind of work that you guys have done of trying to get the essence of that space and decide where that 3D should be better used, I think it's also a narrative tool and a huge decision that you're making in your project on what are you making bigger than usual, what are you making smaller than usual, what are you making crisper than usual, more flatter, etc., etc. Were you guys thinking about those kind of things, about things like positive space and negative space when you were designing your show? Like what you told before about the whole avatar concept, did you wanted the possible audience to be like witnesses of that or be involved in that? I guess that would be the question. It's kind of similar to another question that I made, but it's from another angle.
And I have to interject, I had no idea it's 1:45. So if we could, let everyone give their sort of wrap up in the 3D, and we thank you for your time. I had no idea. So if this could be our last question, thank you.
Well, if it's the last question, I just want to thank you very much because there isn't many spaces for independent filmmakers to show their 3D, and I just wanted to thank you
Thank the
personally.
Landmark.
Thank you to the Landmark.
Thank you, Mark.
Any final words before we shoot you all?
Sorry.
Thank you for coming. And thank you for supporting 3D.
Ned, shut up.
Well, they told me, when I was worrying about whether it's gonna work, they told me, don't worry, it's LA.
I'll just throw something out here real quick. It's fun because I get to work on both sides, working with production and distributing the content in 3D. For any filmmakers that might be in the audience, there is money to be made in 3D, I assure you. And it's not only just in theatrical, independent theatrical as well, but also in broadcast, especially in broadcast. There's a lot of 3D channels that are starting up. There's a lot of 3D channels all over the world. But there is money to be made in it, so don't let it die. Keep it going.
Thank you for having us.
No, thank you, everybody.
Please submit your 3D. We love 3D. We start again tomorrow at 9:30 in the morning. I hope to see you all there. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you so much, everyone.
Oh, it's late. Yeah, if you act the normal Excuse me. Yeah. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, how about that?
Sat down and got like really